and welcome back to Wolverine Live. We are here from the Inner Sanctum. I'm John Borton, here with Tom Crawford in time for Wolverine Live, and that means we're going to be talking about a lot of Michigan football tonight. You all know what's out there. You all know the developments over the last 24 hours. We've been talking about them nonstop in various forms within our own outlets and all of that. You know that Michigan has instituted on its own a 3-game suspension of one head coach, Jim Harbaugh. He now won't be on the sidelines in the opening 3 games of this year, and so thus misses the non-conference season. We thought it was all done. We thought it was okay. The Michigan and the NCAA had agreed to disagree, and this was all going to just go into next season, and we're not going to have anything decided. Well, they still agree to disagree, apparently, but Michigan has handed down the 3-game suspension to itself, to its own football coach, and then we get word that the NCAA says, well, we're not on board with that, so nothing is done. Nothing is finished. Tom Crawford, your reaction to all that?
Before I even start, so I do this Tuesday gig with our mutual friend on his radio show, Pat Hayes, Inside the Cave. And, it's like we talk about what we're going to talk about. But this is like turn on the mics, because every Monday, the drama of the University of Michigan athletics feeds the beast. And we got something all the time. We don't even have to prepare. So what's Monday? It's hot take. Oh, okay, the 3-game self-imposed suspension, and then the NCAA's reaction to it, indifference, whatever. The beat goes on, and it's fatiguing. I'll tell you what, John, as you know, I'm up here, and our listeners know I'm up here in East Lansing, okay, a couple miles from campus. And you used to always say, same old Sparty, same old Michigan State. They don't do things the right when they have an issue. Administratively, they don't handle it. They let it get out of control. They let a 1-day story go to 2-day story, 3-day story. Michigan's becoming Michigan State a little bit in that regard. I'm not getting a handle on this, and it's fatiguing is the best word.
Mm-hmm. So, but I guess my question here is, who might not be on the same page here? Because wouldn't you think that if you're going to make a 3-game head coach suspension on your own, that you would have an understanding with the NCAA that, okay, this was going to be acceptable, this would be it? And if not, why do it?
That's the first thing. I mean, literally. I mean, you were inside my head, JB. That was literally how I worded it to myself.
It's a scary place, I'll tell you.
Yeah, it is. It is scary. But you're right. I mean, this is where there is a in all this stuff. The problem is that we know. I mean, you're closer to the. You're more on top of Michigan football and in Ann Arbor at the pressers and obviously the 3 decades plus of history of covering Michigan athletics. So you're closer to me, but it's like we know just enough to get us in trouble. We know just enough to frustrate us and force us to speculate of what's going on. The dynamic of communication between the administration, between Ward Manuel to Jim Harbaugh to the NCAA. I mean, it's all seems like it's garbled. And I mean, I would be shocked if Michigan, I mean, I can't believe that they didn't have some kind of just a verbal agreement. Yeah. So I think we're going to do the 3 games, self-imposed sanctions on Coach Harbaugh and our 1 game with our assistants. And then, when it gets to the point where you do evaluation of the penalty, that will be strongly considered or something like that. Right. And it looks like there's been absolutely no communication at all. And so it's like back and forth. It's like a ping pong game right now, which once again gives us plenty to talk about on Wolverine Live every Tuesday.
Well, yeah, that's it. And, there just seems to be some kind of a disconnect. And I don't know if it's Michigan deciding, well, we need to show something to the
Yeah,
NCAA in good faith. Look,
yeah,
we're trying to make an effort. You felt that something was wrong on Michigan's end, so we will extend this olive branch. We will go ahead and have the head coach sit out. I definitely think there is a possible scenario in which Jim Harbaugh says the right thing, says he'll go along with this, and is willing to do this because the Michigan has announced it. Uh, but I don't necessarily think that with that comes the head coach's internal agreement or liking it.
Oh, I mean, it's like yesterday. I mean, and I should have looked at it for the 10th time, but didn't Jim Harbaugh inform his team that he'd been informed that we're gonna that didn't he tell him that he was told? Okay, that means that, I mean, it seems like if he was involved in that decision making, it would we've decided to the best way to approach is to a 3 game suspension, self-imposed, in good faith, whatever, and to hopefully get this thing propelled to get resolved. The biggest thing you want to do in all these situations is get ahead of it, and it's so reactionary, seemingly right now, without having some concrete evidence of, if I do this, this is going to happen. And I'm not, that's hasn't been the case, and so, and then we have all that speculation of this disconnected communication slash relationship between Ward Manuel and Jim Harbaugh. We've talked about that for the last 2 years, especially when it came to his contract and things like, which still hasn't been resolved. And that's why it's really a shame right now, because we're on the threshold of, and we've said this, of the deepest, most talented, highest potential Michigan football team that in my lifetime, in terms of raw talent. The culture is everything. Everything is great. The team unity. I mean, this thing is like frightening good right now.
Right.
And yet you have this black cloud coming in that's, it's gonna, take things, it's gonna tarnish this whole wonderful experience of the 23 season that I think is gonna play out.
Well, I don't, I think what would tarnish it is if it affects you on the field.
That's true.
And
Yes.
but what it does lead to is other speculation. And that would be someone weighed in already on this podcast and said, I guarantee you Jim Harbaugh's gone a year from now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you really think, what if Jim Harbaugh decides at the end of this year, I've had enough.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm not going to jump through all of the NCAA hoops, knowing that the real cheaters in college football, nothing happens to them and hasn't for decades. And yet, secondary violations, I mean, that lead to, because the NCAA presumes that there hasn't been honesty on Jim Harbaugh's end. Okay, now it's level one, and
Yeah,
now
yeah.
really,
Level one's not good. Level one's not good. And level one's not good when you have this feeling that the NCAA, which is about ready to erode away, if you will. And then that's once again, my feeling is, when the NIL came on board, when that ingredient came, it's like all of a sudden the NCAA for the Power Five schools had a short-term lifespan, in my opinion. And I think it's going to be entirely, especially when the CFP thing expires in 2 years. I think the whole thing is going to be restructured, and the NCAA will be a group of five, FBS, and, or FBS group of five, FCS, and then below Division 2 and 3. I think that's what it's going to be. And how are they going to generate revenue off that? I don't know. But the bottom line is, I think Jim Harbaugh, initially when I made that proclamation, or projection, that a year from now, I said, because I still think Michigan's going to go 15-0. I really, really think that. And what better way to Jim Harbaugh to go out, thumb his nose at the NCAA, which he's getting in a spit spat with over over these last several months, and to go out and then go chase that itch for the NFL. He's been to the Super Bowl. I think he's got that. He's a competitive guy, and I wouldn't have any bitterness towards him for leaving. But the thing, what is a good thing, I want to have it'd be nice to have a Michigan football coach who's not the story more than the team is, and he's more of the story than this football program's been the last 8 going on 9 years.
Well, then we will see the legitimacy of that in this situation. You just saw the graphic that our producer, Megan, put up that has to do with what Pete Thamel had to say. And it says it's a move that shows that the school is trying to curry favor for good behavior and mitigate some of the eventual punishment.
Yeah.
For a source. Okay. So
yeah, that's what we all thought. Absolutely. That's got written all over. Yep.
But somebody thinks then that the NCAA has more on Harbaugh than what we've been talking about. It's like they text out when they're not even supposed to be. Michigan can't comment on the case, and yet the NCAA comments on the case. Make sure to say more that it's not a cheeseburger.
Yeah, no, that's hypocritical. That's hypocrisy right there with a capital H, because you're demanding that the defendant, if you will, Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, not say anything, and yet they're piping up with stuff, spewing stuff like that. That's idiotic. You don't do that, and that's just lack of integrity, and whatever you want to call it, by the NCAA. That's not good. So I mean, that's. There's something there though when they talk about off-campus recruiting, and the cheeseburger thing that happened. That's on South University, the Brown Jug. I mean, where's this off-campus thing? When did that? Where's that evidence that there was cited off-campus recruiting? Do you know anything more about off-campus recruiting during the dead period?
Well, I know about the Zoom call with the. The individual young man that was not, a couple of these coaches watched on Zoom a young man working out who is not going to wind up playing college football. He is someone that is suffering from a serious illness, and a couple of coaches were willing to watch him work out, and they got in trouble for that.
Yeah.
Whether it's something like that. Thamel again, schools rarely overreach in self-imposing penalties. In the initial negotiated resolution that the COI rejected was for 4 games. While an entire process has to play out, more punishment for Harbaugh is a reasonable expectation considering the school's actions.
Yeah.
Well, okay, then if the further punishment is 1 more game at the start of next season, okay. But in this situation, it better be more serious. It better be more serious than a cheeseburger and the
Zoom call
telling us you don't remember, but we know you remember.
Yeah.
How do you know?
Yeah.
We have this in courtrooms every day. How are you going to prove that intent? And if it's something more than that, okay. What is it? And I really wonder about this. What I don't wonder about is this, Tom. I think that these players are going to be very upset that their head coach is not on the field in those first 3 games.
Yep.
And they can't take it out on the NCAA. There's nothing they can do there. They can't take it out even on maybe expressing it to school officials that they might think, well, why did you do this? They might be able to offer their opinion, but they're not going to be able to inflict pain on the individuals that are calling the shots.
Right.
Who they can inflict pain on: East Carolina, Michigan State, Ohio State.
Yeah.
They've spent the entire offseason people telling them how great they are.
Yeah.
And that can lull you. This, in my opinion, could wake them up. Thoughts?
Yo, ditto, times 10. Yeah, we saw this in Indianapolis, talking to the three Michigan player representative. I mean, that the galvanization, Blake. This is going to pull us together. Chris Jenkins said the same thing. Mikey Sainristil as well. That this is, it sounded really sincere and legitimate. I mean, I think it is going to galvanize in those three games. I mean, I mean, John, you be offensive coordinator. Doug Karsch, he can be defensive coordinator, and I'll be the special teams coordinator. And we'll win that game 56-0. Those first three games. So that's not the issue. But you're right, though. I think they're gonna. And this is a good thing. I think Michigan is galvanized. You're going to take that animosity and show people throughout the season, because I'm going to tell you what, those first three games, and this actually could be a good thing. I think Michigan is going to get absolutely pulverized in a PR standpoint those first three games, because they're gonna load it up on people, and but Harbaugh's not coaching, and well, my God, anybody could, blah blah blah. So their opposition's going to get mocked even more than it would have been otherwise, and that's going to irritate Michigan players. This could be a good thing, because they're going to get mocked. They're going to be, oh yeah, but who do they play? Players they watch college games. They watch this stuff at night and everything. That's going to irritate them. I think it's going to be a plus. That's why I hope it's going to be a plus. But I also think it's going to be a
All right. Well, if I'm the offensive coordinator, just look out for the first play, Blake Corum taking the handoff, pitching to Donovan Edwards out of the slot, and Edwards taking it to the house on the end around.
Yeah.
I shouldn't tip my hand, but
you just gave away your playbook. I mean, my God, you want to script out the first 15 plays, right? That's the way Coach Borton is, right? You script them out, you know what you're going to do.
Absolutely, script out and play off it. Tom, I would ask you this: how do you think this plays long term for Jim Harbaugh? Does this make you less inclined to think that Jim Harbaugh is going to finish out his coaching career at Michigan? Or is it, no, they can work this out, they can get past this?
Well, it depends on the University of Michigan. And, if you want to label Ward Manuel as that decision maker, it has to do with what kind of contract that they're going to reward him with. I mean, because I think this thing is going to, whatever his contract situation is, the NFL is going to come knocking, because, I mean, he's going to have a really good year, and for the third straight year, and probably a three-time Big Ten champion instead of Ohio State. Man, that's high cotton. That's kind of high cotton kind of data right there for any coach. And so he's an elite coach. I'm not, I get frustrated with him at times, but he's a hell of a coach. He's an incredible football mind, and he's improved. Okay, he's developed this culture thing the last 3 years, and he's made some tremendous hires, and letting his coaches coach, whereas that speculation has it he wasn't necessarily doing that before. Okay, so he's gotten better. So he's worth it. So Michigan's got to pay him. If Michigan's willing to pay him what he deserves, yeah, maybe he should be the highest paid coach. If he wins a Big Ten this year, he should be the highest paid coach in the Big Ten, and at least the top three in the entire country: Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, and Jim Harbaugh, or whatever order you want to have. But will Michigan do that? I don't know. Maybe Michigan, University of Michigan, has Harbaugh fatigue. And how much decision-making power does Ward Manuel have? We don't know that. I don't know that. Maybe you know that. I have no idea. And so that's going to have a lot to do with it, let alone what the NFL teams, how much they're going to be impressed by what he accomplishes or not.
Yeah. Those last things you said play into maybe the conspiracy theory narrative that maybe there is someone inside of Michigan that would rather see Jim Harbaugh somewhere else. I think that's, to me, I don't want to speculate on that at this point unless I knew something for sure, but it's something you almost have to think about.
Well, I want to ask you, John, I'm going to flip it on you. It's time. I want to ask you your opinion. I mean, if you were a Michigan fan, I'll just frame it this way, then it takes the heat off you, Mr. Media here. If you were a Michigan fan, would you want Jim Harbaugh back for his, in essence, 10th year and beyond.
If he truly wants to be here, if he's committed, if he is running things in the fashion that he has the past 2 years that have thrust us right back into a higher scoring modern era start of a possible 10-year war with Ohio State, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Then certainly, we talked about at one point when it was still in doubt, is the juice worth the squeeze? And I think it has been every moment of the last 2 years, and Michigan fans would say the same. Now, if you're dealing with situations where there's doubt and there's and it's affecting your program, well, then you run into a whole different thing. But over the past 2 years, Jim Harbaugh has put a stamp on this program, has tweaked some things within it that have gotten Michigan at the top of this league where it expects to be, and also nationally relevant, in position to go after a national championship, which it will go after this year in earnest. And I think if that's the case, oh yeah, keep Jim Harbaugh in the headset, regardless of anything else, any other considerations. But that remains to be seen.
Yeah, and when you talk to the players, I mean, you can tell how much what they feel about Jim Harbaugh. You really, and any other coaches on this, and position coaches and the coordinator. You really, it's there. I mean, you don't have to be a psychologist to figure it out. And that, we know all about what the culture was like in 17 and 18 and 19 and into 20, and then all of a sudden everything got better. Everything got better, and
yes,
just like that. And so I agree with you. I think I think it's good. I just don't think it's going to happen. And it is the part that it is fatiguing. Well, here's the downside of the Harbaugh drama. And this is from the perspective of the recruitniks, that Michigan football fans are so into recruiting, which is a sport of hope towards the future and security. They're saying, "Oh, this 24 class is slipping. This is going to be used against Michigan now. It's going to be a negative recruiting." And I don't even pay attention that much to recruiting. No disrespect to the On3 staff or any of those people or any other platform, but I just wait till signing day and actually wait till they march out on the field and find out how good they are. Maybe the second year do I actually get into recruiting of how good it was. But it sounds like to me it could be used against Michigan in recruiting, and but that's not something that winning a national championship can't offset, though, right?
Oh yeah, right. And that was one more reason, in my mind, you get this settled now. But they offered up their own, but they didn't get it settled because the NCAA, so to speak, did not play ball.
Yeah.
And there are still enough differences, and I think it really comes down to Jim Harbaugh saying and agreeing with the NCAA, yes, I misled. And I don't think he's about to do that.
He's not going to do that. Now, do you think he misled, or don't we know? Did he mislead or did he not? Was he honest? Did he lie? What do you think? Do any of us know, or don't we, or we don't know?
You're trying to prove intent. You're trying to prove. You might say, Tom Crawford, now wait a minute, JB, in a podcast last November, you told me definitively that this is going to happen. And I might say, I don't recall that. I don't recall that. And you would say, oh, you're misleading people now.
Yeah.
Well, am I?
Yeah.
Or did I forget?
Well, I want to know, as the Novocaine worn off on Doug Karsch from getting out of the finish there, this could be a fun 15 or 20 minutes.
How's the teeth look?
Look at those teeth, man. Look at that. He's Mr. Hollywood, man. Teeth.
That's a beautiful thing. Doug Karsch,
look at those chops.
Wolverines, is here. You've heard him for years in the Michigan Radio Network as the sideline reporter. Now he is the big man upstairs, the play-by-play voice of the Wolverines. Doug, great to have you with us out of the dentist chair.
That's right.
Hurt to come here and talk with us. Welcome.
Well, I'm sorry about the delay. I sat in the chair for 20 minutes before they got to my teeth, but I was very pleased that there were no cavities. It didn't take them that long. So
excellent. You're looking good. You could do simultaneously TV as you will.
Yeah. Big Ten Network. Here comes Doug Karsch, right?
Well, I did it because of this appearance, right? I had to look good for you guys.
Hey, the team.
That's right.
Now let me ask you this: we've spent
half hour,
25 minutes talking about the Harbaugh suspension, all of the things involved. I would like to know from Doug Karsch how you're seeing this whole thing and your take on the ramifications, why you make your own self-imposed without an agreement from the NCAA that, okay, this is going to be good. We're gonna play ball and go along.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of play here. I'll start with this. In covering these things for years, I've discovered that it is best to let the processes play out before I get too deep into guilt or innocence. I truly believe that if you have broken a rule, then accept the punishment and move on. So if at the end of this, it's 3 games or 4 games or 6 games or 8 games or whatever, you accept it, you vow to do better, and you move on. But I also believe in due process and have applied this on the air for years. And years ago, I remember there was my daughter's yelling in the background. Can you hear her, or is this just distracting?
We caught her.
Hey guys, can we keep it down a little?
This makes it real. This
sorry.
Real time.
Anyway, I believe in due process, right? And I remember years ago there was a charge against Mark D'Antonio in East Lansing over an improper firing of an employee that ended up with the Jones Day group coming in and investigating. And at the end of that, they found no wrongdoing, right? So I've often preached patience. Everybody wants to rush to judgment on these things. And, I talked to Dan Wetzel today at Yahoo Sports, and he said he thinks this is probably the bulk of this story. By the time we get around to a hearing in January or February, it's probably going to calm down. Cooler heads will prevail. It feels a little bit personal because the NCAA did something they've never done before, which is come out and speak directly to fans and message board posters as it pertains to it's just a cheeseburger, because it's not just a cheeseburger.
Right.
To have that as an official statement sounds like it's gotten personal to them. Nobody at Michigan said that. Jim Harbaugh didn't say it. So they're responding to fans.
Yes, exactly.
Which is really, really a unique case circumstance for this thing. So I'm not rushing to judgment. I think that it seems so incredibly unlikely that someone would lie over secondary violations. That's the virtual slap on the wrist.
Right.
So why would you mislead investigators over secondary violation accusations? It just doesn't make sense to me. And I doubt it would make sense to Jim Harbaugh. And he has been adamant about having nothing to be ashamed of, and that, someday he will say his piece. And I look forward to it. You guys know, and you've been around Jim Harbaugh, when he's got something to say, he says it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I said, in a world where everybody wants to rush to judgment and hot takes are big in my business, I'm going to hold off, because I think Jim deserves the due process, and with respect for the process, let it play out. But some things don't add up in this one, and so we'll see how it does play out.
Well, Doug, can I throw a question about? Do you think the 3-game self-imposed Jim Harbaugh was involved in that decision making? Was this a Ward Manuel decision? Was it higher up than that? Because it sounds like he told his team that he was like I've been told. Was he involved in it?
I think I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think there's a weird vibe that I get from Michigan fans that they think that these entities of Ward Manuel and his office and Jim Harbaugh and his group operate completely independent of one another, and I don't know that that's true. And I also, again, when he says things, I'm skeptical that he didn't know that this was coming, and I'm skeptical. Like, when people don't understand things, I think they immediately think, well, it's being run by idiots. And I know people that work very closely to this situation that are not idiots. They're very smart, and they understand how college athletics works. And sometimes when things don't add up, you later hear a story that makes you go, oh, that's what happened. And it all makes sense. So, I've got calls in, and I'm constantly talking to people, and I haven't heard the, oh, that makes sense story yet. And when I do, I'll share it. But, it's just such a strange, like, again, talking to Wetzel, who's covered NCAA violations from Bill Self to North Carolina academic fraud to all kinds of stuff, right? Yeah. He said this case is so strange. It's so different than any he's ever covered before. But he also said, look at Jim Harbaugh's track record. He seems to operate best when there's chaos around him. And so, I guess we'll see.
One more on this topic before we talk.
Let me just add one thing. Though, from Michigan's perspective, why they might have decided on the 3 games because that 3 games would be a bit much for secondary violations or level 2 violations. They have a season to protect too. They have a program to protect. So this might be about, okay, if we overpunish in terms of what typical, because if you look at it, the NCAA views things in percentage of the season. Like this, they don't see it as a 3-game suspension. They see it as a quarter of the season, which would exceed a lot of level 2 violations. Mm-hmm. And it's probably not going to impact Michigan on the field in any way. So if they overpunish now, they might avoid any sort of have to forfeiture of wins later. So that might have some motivation behind this as well. Again, I'm not reporting this. I don't know this. This is just some speculation as to why 3 games was decided upon.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense when you put it that way.
Could be.
One more thing that before we get to actual football talk, and that would be this. And I asked Tom before you came on about this. Does this in any way make you feel less inclined to believe that Jim Harbaugh will make this his last stop in his coaching career, just because, it's one more block in the wall. It's one more, maybe Jim Harbaugh behind the scenes shaking his head and saying, look, we know there are major cheaters out there, and there have been for decades. And now I'm dealing with this. I just wonder if it might make him more inclined at some point to take another hard look at the NFL.
Well, you can't go to the NFL without an NFL offer.
Right.
There has to be the right job and the right owner and the right people that want you. And that's not always the case. So at this point, it hasn't really changed my opinion until I see what jobs open up. Jim Harbaugh is a hell of a good football coach. And Jim Harbaugh, the healthiest on the field Michigan has been, we're in the middle of it right now.
Right.
He's got it up and running. He's got a chance with the quarterback that they have now, the quarterback in the pipeline, and the quarterback down the road that they're trying to get, where he can really set this thing up for a good, long, healthy run. And I have to think that that's still extremely attractive to Jim Harbaugh. And having to make that decision is so far off that I think in the end, cooler heads prevail on all fronts. I really believe that. I believe that this 3-game suspension very well could be it. I don't know that, but I wouldn't be shocked. And I think if this season goes the way it very well could go and how it might play out in recruiting, I think Jim Harbaugh might say, okay, it's really mostly behind me now. Let's go run this thing and run the course with what I got up and running right here, right now.
But Doug,
if he doesn't, he loves his staff, and I feel like the staff is in capable hands that, we might get a look at the heir apparent in game 1, 2, or 3, or all of them.
Yeah, well, but Doug, don't you think that what Michigan delivers in terms of a rewritten contract after whatever is accomplished this year will have impact when his ego, we're all got egos, becomes involved in that equation along with NFL enticement?
Well, it could. I mean, I know that Michigan was like, okay, we need to show the NCAA we're serious. We do want to sign you to a new contract, but we are not going to do it. Well, with this hanging over they won't. Right. How do you convince the NCAA you're serious and give the guy that's under the scrutiny a new contract, right? So they wanted to get this over with. Maybe that's why they went 3 games. Hey, we took this seriously. We overpunished based on level 2 violations that we have accepted that we're committed. And the only debate is over whether or not there was a level 1 violation, but we've overpunished, and now maybe they're more comfortable offering the contract that has probably been sorted out behind the scenes.
He's Doug Karsch, voice of the Wolverines, voice of reason at the moment. And we're going to get back to him in just 1 minute, but we're going to take a quick break for a quick word from our sponsors and then talk Michigan football on the field. We do want to take a moment to shout out the sponsor of our Tuesday night recruiting show, a longtime partner of the Wolverines in Lewis Jewelers. Simple question, guys. Is your daughter's engagement ring bigger than that of your wife? If the answer is yes, great news. Lewis Jewelers can help. It's stress-free and easy working with one of their non-commissioned expert trusted advisors, finding that perfect diamond. So stop by today, guys, and fix the family issue. Lewis Jewelers, your diamond store, and so much more since 1921. Visit them at their new location, 300 South Maple Road, Ann Arbor, or online at lewisjewelers.com. That's LEWISJEWERS.com. That's Lewis Jewelers, where Ann Arbor gets engaged. And we also have a new sponsor this week, Susie Surma of Modus Realty. Are you ready to buy a home? This is one of, if not the most expensive purchases you'll ever make. Having a realtor who listens and cares about your needs is crucial. Susie Surma is the right local expert for you. Susie includes a free buyer's consultation to uncover your home buying needs, maximizing experience and efficiency. Email her today at Susie, SUSIE, at MOTUSRE.com. Let's face it, the market's been challenging for buyers. The critical piece you might be missing is having the right agent. Using a realtor that has superior knowledge and negotiation skills is a key to closing on the home of your dreams. Local expert Susie Surma is your answer. Not only does she know the area, she's a fierce negotiator. Why not build equity now? Contact Susie Surma to start your customized home search today. Call Susie at 248-767-5633 or email her SUSIE at MOTUSRE.com. And now back to the Wolverine Live, the edition where we bring in the guy that's going to be on high, speaking about giving you the play-by-play in that very first Michigan game coming up right around the corner. And here's my question for you, Doug. What is it in that first game that you will be scrutinizing most closely? We've heard that we're going to have different starting tackles from game 1 to game 2. We know that there are changes in the play calling. We've heard them talk about going 50-50, running and passing, different things, changes on the defense. What will you be locked in on? Obviously, you'll be locked in on your job, bringing the game. But when you step back from that first game, what will you sift through to see, okay, this is what was important to me?
So I think one of the concerns is kind of obvious in terms of players that you want to see perform. And look, East Carolina isn't, and they got a transfer from Georgia, maybe the most talented receiver in Jalen Johnson, but they're probably not going to challenge the Michigan secondary. But you want signs that the starter opposite of Will Johnson can get the job done, that some of the new faces we're going to see perform at safety, whether it be, Keon Sabb or Zeke Berry, that somebody there gets it done. I mean, I love Rod Moore. Rod Moore is a film room rat, and it showed on the air. I've told the story a number of occasions how he kind of single-handedly blew up Penn State's last gasp attempt when he was a true freshman in their final drive and knew exactly what play was coming. And just, he basically told Mike McDonald at the time while he was on the field, like, shut up, I got this, as a true freshman. But so I have faith in the safety spot, but they need to show some depth there. And the corner opposite of Will Johnson needs to prove itself throughout the course of the season, because while there's a lot of football to be played now between now and the end of the year, Ohio State's coming at you with elite wide receivers. So last year, Michigan had two guys that are now battling for spots in the NFL, and DJ Turner and Jamon Green, who are helping out. Even the touchdown they threw to Marvin Harrison was an incredible throw and catch. Jamon Green was stride for stride with him in that northeast corner of the end zone down in Columbus. But the other thing that I think is kind of underrated is Michigan has had veteran in the system or really smart play out of the center position on the offensive line. And I always think it's kind of an underrated thing when you switch centers. And there's no reason to think that Drake Nugent or Greg Crippen, whoever gets the call, can't get it done. But I'd like to see it, because they lost, Vastardis was a program guy who understood everything that was expected of him. And Oluwatimi was just I guess as Harbaugh would say, a gift from the football gods. That spot is so critical when you're trying to determine, what everybody's assignment is on the offensive line, and make sure that, the snap counts and assignments and all that is solid. So I think that's kind of an underrated challenge of the system, because they got the personnel. Physically, they got the personnel. They just have to make sure everybody's on the same page.
All right. Tom Crawford, what do you know from the voice of the Wolverines?
Well, I agree with Doug, everything about the defense is that other corner spot. But I'm looking at the offense, and I'm also looking at how Michigan's going to approach this game with East Carolina. East Carolina has been a kind of a feisty team in the past. But how are they going to approach this offense and J.J. McCarthy? How much are they going to put him out there as a Cam Newton-esque type threat? They're going to do that against East Carolina? I doubt it. But I just like to know if that's that 50-50 thing's going to be going on. And if that third receiver, well, it be Frederick Moore or somebody else, or Tyler Morse, whoever that guy is going to be, is that going to pop out on the screen for us? Yeah, that's the guy. That's going to be the guy, because I think they're going to need that offensively moving on. The offensive line is going to dominate. We heard about the 7 guys that are going to be cited as candidates for the Senior Bowl. That's not going to be an issue, but it's wide receiver and that other corner spot that Doug talked about. Those are kind of the X factors we've been talking about for 3 months. Because with all this depth, that's the only thing we can pick at. And so that's what I'm going to be looking at, the wideout.
Yeah. All right. Okay, Doug, you are obviously, as a function of your job, in position to talk to a lot of people in and around Michigan and in and around Michigan football. I'm wondering if you could let us know a couple of the most interesting things that you have heard that we may not have at this point concerning the season to come.
Well, I will tell you, and I think he's probably said it on a show, but John Jansen loves the offensive line, go figure, but he also loves the defensive line, and he loves the linebacking core. He feels like the front 7 is loaded with NFL type players. And the one name that he mentioned is Derek Moore. He thinks is ready to have a huge season. And, I don't know if this is breaking new ground, because I think John probably has said some of it on the air on his show in the mornings on 97.1. But yeah, the vibe I am getting is that Ernest Hausman's going to fit in brilliantly. You know, Michael Barrett is a kid that someday I want to see if we can get him to talk about, and you know, depending on how the season goes and the kind of season he's having, you know, the benefit of sticking around and continuing to battle and then getting yourself in a position to be able to play, because you know, he had to wait his time really, and before he kind of became a full-time participant, and now he is. And I want to hear his story a little bit in a little bit more detail. That linebacker room, Jansen thinks, is loaded. And Jaden Hood spoke yesterday and said something really interesting, because he was asked about, in this day and age, when you see kids when they're not on the field right away, many of them transfer. And he said, when I go to bed at night and I dream about football, the dream is always with me in a winged helmet. And I thought that was a great line, and the kind of thing that fans would love. So, you know, there is something to be said that Michigan is at a point now where probably their biggest recruits this season were Trevor Keegan, Zach Zinter, Cornelius Johnson, Michael Barrett, guys like that they got to come back. And, you know, I think NIL makes people really uncomfortable just because it's the new, anytime there's change, and the older you get, it's harder to accept the change. But NIL is probably a reason a lot of guys, Blake Corum, a lot of reason why guys decided to come back. Hey, I'm not turning down money anymore, and I can continue doing something I love with people I love at a place that I love. And if that's what one of the sort of unintended side effects of name, image, and likeness is, it could make college football, that can make college football better. You know, I think it's hurt college basketball's popularity because you don't build relationships with players that you love and players you hate. So as soon as somebody shows that they're any good, they're gone. So maybe, you know, in college football, you always had to stay 3 years. So, you know, I'm trying to see a positive of it, and that might be it. I gave you a long rambling answer. I don't know if any of that is stuff that people hadn't heard before, but those are some of the interesting things I've heard.
It's interesting.
Yeah, Doug, can I just chime in? You're talking about the defense and disruptive part of this defense that Jansen was talking about. Last year at Big Ten Media Days, Harbaugh went raving about this Kenneth Grant, you know, this freshman coming in. And now I'm hearing things like he's really doing well in, you know, as far as camp goes. Do you think he's going to be as much of that nose tackle emergence as Mason Graham and some of the other down linemen?
Yeah, he says he feels quicker. He says he can, you know, with the weight that he lost, he can be on the field for more snaps. And, you know, last year, he said this year he passed the conditioning test, no problem. So, and I asked him specifically, did you not pass it last year? He said, no, I passed it, but this year it was no problem. So, yeah, I mean, guys get to this level and see what it takes. And then, you know, it's how committed are you to making the adjustment? And it sounds like Kenneth Grant is willing to do whatever it takes to make that adjustment and to be ready to go a week from Saturday.
Okay, quick hitter to end this thing. I was around an offensive lineman, former offensive lineman of Michigan myself the last couple of days. He would be Mr. Douglas Skeen, who can hit a golf ball a long, long way, and also hits hard when talking about Michigan football. He asked me how I evaluated Michigan's readiness from a talent standpoint to come into this. I said, I think this is the most loaded team since 1997. And we didn't even know at that point how good 97 was going to be. And so some people dismissed it, but I think this may be the most talented team. So my question to you guys is, we'll go Tom first and Doug can finish. How ready is Michigan from the personnel standpoint and just the overall readiness standpoint to make this a really special season?
Well, I'm knocking on wood right now as far as injuries goes, because that's always an issue. And it's always, you always fear when Harbaugh comes out, well, he's working on something. You know, he got an issue where, you know, soft tissue and all, you don't want to hear that. But I've been following this program. I'm much older than Doug. I'm older than you, JB. In 1964, when they went to the Rose Bowl with Bob Timberlake, I've never, ever recall a team this deep, both sides of the ball, with names that we know on the threes that have played relevant football. And that's that sheer depth. And then JJ McCarthy, who I think is going to be the Heisman representative in that for the University of Michigan, as opposed to Donovan or Blake. I think he's going to be the guy in New York. Maybe another guy will as well. But he's the key. So if he delivers as the greatest quarterback in Michigan football history, which I think he will be at the end of this year, that's why I'm bullish on this Michigan team in 2020.
All right. Doug Karsch, what do you think?
2016 was pretty loaded. And in retrospect, maybe one late hit away from playing for a national championship. But yeah, they're pretty loaded. And it's funny you say knock on wood, and I agree with you. And yet I also think this is when depth matters most.
That's true.
And there's a couple positions that are thin that you pointed out. We nitpick those positions because there's so much depth everywhere else. I mean, honestly, JJ's a game changer, but even at the quarterback position, I feel like there's depth and there's guys that can win football games at the Big Ten level and maybe some big ones. And so, I also knock on wood for this team to live up to expectation, but maybe less so in previous years because I think there's some margin for error there. You hope for the best, but this team might be built to be able to endure some injuries to some key guys and still live up to an expectation. So I like to say that's where depth matters most, is when guys get hurt. And but they are absolutely loaded. And I will say Doug Skeen, for people who don't know, if you get a chance to meet him, one of the greatest dudes you will ever meet.
Not about it.
He is an awesome, awesome guy.
Yeah, and a good golf partner.
Yeah.
Doug,
highly opinionated too, mind you, highly opinionated.
And he will bring it, just like Doug Karsch and Tom Crawford did tonight in this edition of the Wolverine Live. Thanks for joining us. Thank you guys for joining us. And we will do this again next week on the Wolverine Live.